Social fragmentation refers to a condition in which individuals and communities lose their connections and sense of belonging to a wider society. Now, this can happen from a combination of factors, including economic inequality, cultural differences, and political polarization. Now, the absence of social connections and shared sense of identity can lead to social isolation, distrust, and even hostility towards others who are perceived as different. So, one of the main causes of social fragmentation is economic inequality. So, when people feel left behind or excluded from economic opportunities, they may become disillusioned and lose faith in the system. This can create resentment and social distance between different groups, particularly those who feel they are not benefiting from economic growth. So, in The Great Gatsby, we can see different forms of social isolation. First, we know we have old money and new money, but also the Valley of Ashes and the big wealth gap that is present there as the price of many like millionaires and for certain people to live lavishly. That's just the consequence of a system where there are winners and losers. There's just no equality. And for there to be winners, there has to be losers. Another example of this would be the character George Wilson. In The Great Gatsby, he owns a gas station, and his interaction with Tom shows that he is definitely of lower class and definitely doesn't make as much money as Tom. And you can definitely see the benefits of being rich through this part of the novel, as Tom's able to get what he wants and George Wilson has to work and struggle to make ends meet. Now, this sort of separation, it can lead to a lack of social interaction and empathy between different groups, especially in the wealth gap where it seems as though when you make it big, there doesn't seem to be much of any empathy towards the other group. Now, eh, um, it can further enhance this social fragmentation. Now, another big factor that plays role into this would be the cultural differences. This is a significant factor because to social fragmentation in diverse societies, people with different cultural backgrounds could struggle to find common ground, and this can lead to misunderstandings, and conflicts. An example of this would be cultural linguistic barriers. For many immigrants, they could struggle to integrate into many linguistic barriers and even into mainstream society. So, social norms and values can vary widely between different groups, and this can create sort of tension and even division at times. So, it's all caused largely by the failure to recognize and respect cultural diversity, which can lead to people being marginalized or certain groups also being marginalized. And further, this erodes the social cohesion of society. Now, a really big factor would be political polarization. It's a critical factor that can contribute to social fragmentation in today's political climate. People often identify strongly with one political ideology and reject alternative viewpoints. This can lead to a lack of compromise and cooperation, and it makes it challenging to address common challenges facing society, such as the United States with its two main political parties that strongly oppose each other. Now, moreover, political polarization can create an us versus them mentality. It's it's a way that different groups see each other as enemies rather than fellow citizens that live in the same country, and this can just fuel social fragmentation and undermine democratic institutions and processes. Now, F. Scott Fitzgerald's work gave the readers an idea on what it was like to live lavishly and be rich, and the consequence that was paid in order for them to live that way by the lower class of society and those living at the bottom. It can almost be seen as a critique of the American dream. You either win it big or you don't. The breakdown of institutions is another cause of social fragmentation. Institutions like schools, churches, and community centers have traditionally provided a sense of social cohesion and would bring people together around shared values and interests. Even examples being a club or sport you may join at school. Now, in recent years, these institutions have been weakened, and this wouldn't be necessarily like school involvement, but community centers that revolve around people and working adults to put in effort and come together. And people may feel that they are living in a world without a sense of community or shared purpose. And this could be because there are many people who work long hours and jobs in order to make ends meet and to be able to provide for their families. Now, the consequences of social fragmentation can be really severe, and when individuals and communities feel disconnected from society, they may become isolated and vulnerable to social problems like the alley, for example, and other such mental issues and substance abuse and crime. In Medak Alley by Nagui Mahfouz, we see many young characters who desire to raise children, and when they do, they raise them into poverty. Now, we can see this through Abbas and his desire to be with Hamida. Now, Abbas, in order to live happily with Hamida, he decides to join the British Army, and that way he can make enough money to get married to her. Now, doing so leads to the ending and why it ends the way it does. And as a result of the alley's isolation from the rest of society in Egypt, Hamida decides to nearly sell herself to a complete stranger, and she decides to completely abandon her home at the alley for to live better off and with more luxuries. And in a sense, this can feel pretty empty. Now, aside from the various social problems, moreover, the absence of social cohesion can reduce social trust among everybody Even in the alley, there were the interactions between every character, like the barber and every little shady thing some of them were involved in, and their desires and secrets that they would keep hidden from their families. And even so, all these things can lead to further polarization and fragmentation. Even in extreme cases, social fragmentation can lead to violent conflict and even a civil war, as we have seen in many various parts of the world. So, to address social fragmentation, policymakers need to adopt multifaceted approach that addresses the underlying cause of this phenomenon. So this can include such things as addressing economic inequalities and promoting cultural diversity and inclusion. Another thing that could help with this would be reducing political polarization, and for example, such policies that can increase access to education and healthcare and affordable housing, which can help reduce economic inequalities and promote social mobility. And similarly, there are many policies that do recognize and respect cultural diversity, especially in the United States. And these things could help build bridges between communities and reduce such tension and division. Of course, the social wealth gap is just a part of our economic system of a free market economy. And many policies may respect and help build connections between different communities. And finally, to reduce social fragmentation, we can promote collaboration across different political viewpoints. In a way, this can likely build trust between different communities and foundations, and it can reduce polarization. In conclusion, social fragmentation is a significant and challenging issue facing contemporary societies. It's a complex phenomenon from a combination of economic and cultural and political factors, and could very likely result in various social problems. In order to address these problems, policymakers need to adopt much more comprehensive and open-minded approaches. The only way for different groups, these being ethnic groups, cultural groups, or even people of different economic classes, to finally come together and collaborate and be united as a society. Policymakers may need to adopt a more comprehensive approach that can, one, address the underlying causes of social fragmentation, and promote social inclusion and diversity and collaboration. By doing this, more resilient and inclusive societies may become better equipped to tackle on challenges of the 21st century and onward.